This is a topic that I could speak about for many, many hours. So I'm going to give you some really simple things that you can do to start feeling better pretty much almost immediately, because these changes will take effect instantly. And depending on where you are in the health of your brain and your gut, you're going to start to feel some improvements within a few days, if not by the end of the day, depending on what you really need to change. So the first thing when it comes to healing the brain is sleep. This is something that's very overlooked and very underutilized as a healing modality. The brain heals when you're sleeping. When we're awake, when we're running around, when we're doing things, we're in a catabolic state. We want to get into an anabolic state, and that only happens when you're actually sleeping or in a state of rest, which for most people, the only time they rest these days is when they're sleeping, especially entrepreneurs. So sleep is very critical. It's one of the keys to brain health long term, not just short term. We don't want to do things, crazy things, to get short term brain health and improve neurological function. We want to have long term brain health, because longevity is what creates empires, not flashes in the pan. So always think long term. Sleep is when the brain repairs. The brain actually shrinks while we're sleeping so that we can have an increase in cerebrospinal fluid. And this fluid then heals and nurtures the brain. So make sure you go into bed on time. The next thing is I want you to make sure that you're regulating blood sugar. Blood sugar regulation regulates insulin. When we regulate insulin, we allow the amino acids that are the precursors to our neurotransmitters, like tryptophan and tyrosine, we allow these to be carried across the blood-brain barrier when we have proper insulin and blood sugar balance. So if you want good brain health, the brain needs glucose as a fuel source, but the brain also needs proper insulin regulation to allow nutrients to cross that, semi-permeable and very selectively permeable blood-brain barrier. The next thing that you want to do when you're regulating and trying to improve brain health is regulate light exposure. So our brain, or rather our retina, contains a high density of mitochondria, but it also contains receptors for different frequencies of light. And by knowing what frequency of light is coming into the brain, whether it's a warmer temperature, full spectrum lighting, the brain regulates our circadian hormones. So this is cortisol, melatonin, etc. And this needs to be tightly regulated in order for us to experience proper hormone balance at the right time of the day. So very critical, very overlooked. A good way to reset your circadian biology is by regulating your light exposure in the morning, first thing. So we'll go outside, watch the sunrise, or get a lamp in your room that mimics the sunrise. And then midday sun to increase serotonin, which later increases melatonin. And the third thing is watching the sunset. Now, the thing that's interesting, depending on where you live in the world, the length of the day varies from day to day. So this makes it difficult to regulate circadian biology. If you live close to the equator, guess what? The day is the same length pretty much throughout the entire year. So it becomes really easy when you go to central countries like in Central America, for example. The length of the day is pretty much uniform day in and day out. The next thing that I want you guys to really, really focus on is exposure to sunlight. Now, we talked about circadian rhythm, but sunlight exposure beyond that increases a process called sulfation. Sulfation increases the ability of blood vessels to dilate, and it also increases something called a special type of water called the fourth phase of water, and this creates what's called an exclusion zone. This exclusion zone creates a negative charge inside our blood vessels, which then actually creates a battery. So as blood is flowing through our blood vessels, there's an electrical potential that's created. The sun dilates these blood vessels, allows for microcirculation to take place, and then it charges our brain and our entire battery. So these are things that you can start doing. And then one more thing is reduce inflammation. Anything you can do to reduce inflammation is going to increase your faculties for healing, repairing, regenerating, and it's going to get your body to focus on making the right neurotransmitters instead of pain modulating chemicals. Your body's going to make growth and performance related molecules. So I hope these tips help. I hope it gives you some insight. I'd love to do a longer presentation so that we can dive deeper into some of this stuff and give you some significant action steps, but I've given you about 5 to 10 things that you can start working on to help feeling your best. Thank you.